predict how the graph is related to the other graph, well, we can just go through each of our things here and say, what is the 1/4? The 1/4 is going to be a vertical compression. You're going to multiply your y values by 1/4. What about the 3? The 3 is a horizontal compression. You'd multiply your x values by 1/3. The 1/6, or pi over 6, horizontal translation, pi over 6 to the left. And the 2 is a vertical translation, 2 up. Now, if we go to sketch this, I'm going to write dab C here. Start with D. Your D value is a +2. So you'd label y equals 2 as your sinusoidal axis. D value complete. Next, use your amplitude, which is 1/4, to mark your maximum, 2.25, and your minimum, go down 0.25, 1.75. Those will be our max and min values. Amplitude, done. Next, our B value finds our period. Our period is 2 pi divided by our B value, and our B value this time is 3. So our period is 2 pi over 3. Go somewhere along your x-axis, and I would suggest in the homework, if they provide you a graph, to not use it, because often the scale that they provide is harder to work with than making your own scale. So just go somewhere along your scale, make a mark, and say, this is 2 pi over 3, because now I can easily divide it into 4 sections. Label the one in the middle first. What's half of 2 pi over 3? Pi over 3. Label the first one next. What's half of pi over 3? Pi over 6. Then count by pi over 6's to get the third one. 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6. And you could reduce that to pi over 2 if you wanted, or you could leave it like that. Your B value finds your period, and you label it on your x-axis in 4 equal sections. Next, you go and graph it temporarily with a dotted line. Well, where does a cos graph start? A cos graph always starts at a maximum. Then it goes to the center line, then to the minimum, then to the center line, then back to the maximum. So here is your graph without the phase shift. Now our final graph, what do we need to do? We need to go, oh, I should do a check mark, dash is done. Final graph, we need to shift this pi over 6 to the left. So it looks like pi over 6 to the left would be that same distance. I'm going to graph my final graph in black. So my maximum is going to be here, center line here. Shift them all, pi over 6 to the left. And we now have our complete graph. Now, often on your exam, they will ask you to graph it for one period. This question is kind of annoying because they said to graph it between -2 pi and 2 pi. So you would actually have to, this is 2 pi over 3, you would have to keep going for quite a long time until you actually put a scale in place from -2 pi to 2 pi over 3. In fact, you might want to, if I redrew right in the middle like this and labeled 2 pi over here on the same distance, -2 pi over there, what did I graph? I only graphed that section there from 0 to 2 pi over 3. I would have to redo this over and over again to draw the whole thing in the domain that they asked. Right? Here would be 2 pi divided by 3. Here would be 4 pi over 3, that's double, and then this is 6 pi over 3. And each of these sections you divide into 4. Here was negative pi over 6. So, and here is 2.25 and 1.75. And we started at the maximum there, and then you can just keep switching. Oops, this one be there. Okay, so starting at a max, then center line, then min, then center line, then max, then center, then min, then center line, then max, then center line, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And then draw your curve between there going on. That's not very accurate right now. And stop when you get to 2 pi, and then go backwards as well, and stop when you get to negative 2 pi. And this is what they were asking for in this question. However, I would highly recommend draw one period first, just like we did, see what that graph looks like. Then, if you do have to graph it at a certain range, you can apply that afterwards. And it just repeats itself over and over again. Again, on the final exam, they almost always ask you to graph at least one period, which would allow you to do what we did at first. Questions for practice on this one are 3, 8, 9, 10, and 11.